that... Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the red rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low Magazine? Because 4Low Magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. All right, on today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have none other than Richard Jenkins. Anybody that's in the Four Corners area, all the way, I'd say, from Moab to Farmington to Las Cruces, Arizona, southwestern Colorado, you're going to know Richard Jenkins if you wheel. He is an integral part of the wheeling community here and has been since he was just a child. And he grew up with some of the iconic people of our history that are no longer with us. And we're going to talk not only Richard's history, but we're going to talk about some of those icons that he grew up with or grew up around. So, Richard, first of all, I'd like to thank you for all the hard work that you have done to get We Rock and our rock crawling series back into Farmington over the last few years, and the friendship and the writing you have done for our magazine and all that. You're just a stand-up guy, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for coming on board.
Well, it's definitely a pleasure to be part of this, and I got to say it's very flattering to actually be part of the podcast as well. It's like the last piece of the We Rock 4Low magazine, and the podcast with you it's just really flattering to be part of that.
Well, thank you. So let's get started right at the beginning. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
So I was born in Plano, Texas, at Plano General High School,
At the high school? Wait a second.
sorry. I was born in Plano, Texas.
That's a different type of home ec class. Okay.
Yeah.
I digress. Let's go. Okay.
Yeah. At the Plano General Hospital. And that hospital doesn't exist anymore. In fact, my oldest daughter, the hospital she was born in doesn't exist anymore, as interesting as that is. But we moved to Farmington, New Mexico in 1982, and I was pretty much just born into the back of an International Scout2, so to speak. I was just always running in the back of a Scout. They had a crib in the back of the Scout, and so when we'd be out four-wheeling, I'd be trying to stop myself from falling asleep. I'd fall over and get right back up and try to see everything we were doing. But still, it's back in the day when the seatbelt laws, there weren't seatbelt laws and stuff like that. But it just shows, how far back it goes and everything for me.
Right. Let's reference that time period, if you don't mind. How old are you now?
Not at all. So I'm 40 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do the math. So let's talk more about that early time. Your parents, some of the people that they hung out with, like Harold Off and all that, and the others. Let's dive into that a little bit, and then we'll get back into your history.
Oh, sure. Yeah. When I was a kid, so it was 1982 when we moved to Farmington, and in 1983 we had been four-wheel driving with Jim Peterson and a few other people like Leroy Riley and Bobby Harrison, Harold Foz, Don Sisson, And that's Garrett and Matt Sisson's dad. They used to compete in UROC and ARCA. They were the Skyjacker competitors.
Absolutely.
And we used to 4-wheel drive with them. Harold Off came around a little bit. He was around, but came around wheeling with all of us a little bit later, I think. But in 1983, Jim Peterson pulled my parents into the club because Dad was really good at doing all kinds of different land use stuff. In fact, it was through the 80s and 90s that Dad was a delegate for United 4-Wheel Drive Association and doing some of the lobbying and stuff in Washington, D.C., just to make sure that the Department of Interior still recognized and wouldn't do anything with our ability to 4-wheel drive in the public lands.
Right. And that was specifically in this area, or was he working nationwide, trying to keep public lands?
He was working nationwide.
Okay.
Early on, when 4-wheel drive and sport utility started he wrote for them and worked with Mark Workmeister and Harold Ogden and different people like that. And so we would all end up 4-wheeling together. In fact, when Southwest 4-Wheel Drive Association started, the first annual meeting was basically held at my parents' house. Everybody registered and came in, and we had a big meeting. And then the rest of it was held in Chokecherry Canyon. And we were basically representing for the first time to people that we had this really great area that people had been building 4-wheel drive trails in, the San Juan 4-wheelers, since the late 60s. And that's around the time, late 60s is around the time that Harold Off changed the name of San Juan Auto and Truck Dismantlers to Off again.
Okay.
And since 1948, Off again, or the Auto and Truck Dismantlers, were working on Jeep vehicles and 4-wheel drive vehicles. But then when you were building a vehicle like that, you weren't necessarily building it to drive on the trail to go out and do what we do now for fun. You were building these rigs so that they could get to well sites. And at that time, the basin was just kicking off too, the San Juan Basin. So a lot of like your Willys, Jeeps and stuff, they would get drilling implements added to them and, different other PTO devices. And we were having to build a lot of this stuff. I should say Harold and Charlie Off were having to build a lot of the stuff that was going on all of these 4-wheel drive vehicles just so that they could get to where they needed to and get the pad done and put together the well site.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It was a lot different. You didn't have these lease roads that were maintained back then.
Right. It was really wildcatting.
Yeah. It was very cross country. You had a plot and you had to figure out how to get there through a section that was considered a right of access.
Okay.
So later on though, as the club grew, it really turned into one of the hot spots, or I should say Farmington turned into one of the hot spots. It was the early 90s when we were breaking Waterfall Trail and Intimidator. And then later on, about five or so years after we were really breaking those trails, that the Gladiator Trail came in. And at the time, they were growing into being some of the most iconic trails, in the country. I mean, they weren't the top trails necessarily, but they were within like the top 3. When we launched Intimidator,
hardcore trails.
Yeah, really hardcore trails. And remember, back then, you didn't really have much more than a 33-inch tire. If you had a 35 when they came out, that was just nuts.
Right.
But when we broke Intimidator Trail, I want to say that was probably 94, 95, somewhere in there. And we had 6 Jeeps, and it took 8 hours to go 1 mile. And that trail is still 1 mile, and it's not much faster. Now, if you have a 4600 car or a 4400 car, I think Kyle Roach ran it in 7 minutes, and we had somebody in a 4600 car run it in something like 12 minutes. So there wasn't much difference. You really have to slow down. If you overdrive, you'll end up driving off a cliff. And we really did on Intimidator. When I moved back here in 2005, the week after I moved back, we had 2 fatalities on the Intimidator trail where they just dipped down, must have stepped on their brakes too hard or something, and the Jeep started rolling downhill and it went off a cliff.
Wow.
So it was, that was a really, really rough time for some of the people that were here. We have a competitor that was out this weekend, Isaac Overwright. It was his dad's best friend that went off with another passenger in the vehicle, and Mike is barely getting back into four-wheeling today.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, and just to reference it, when he says this weekend, it was the We Rock Grand National Championship here in Farmington in Chokecherry Canyon at Brown Springs. So for
2021.
Yeah, yep, absolutely, 2021. So let's talk about some of those trails that are out here real quick.
So in Chokecherry Canyon, we have 21,000 acres of recreation area. 3,800 of those acres are completely open, meaning if you see a crack or a climb, you can drive it. Now, anybody in the club will yell at you if you're running over trees or going cross country or something.
Even though it's an open area, right.
Right. And we're really these days in a lot of open areas around the country, we are getting tired of which side of the tree do you want to drive around, Right. If there's a main path, take the main path. If there's not an obstacle, there's no reason to drive any which way around a tree, right? So,
or a rock really in the road. I mean, you're out there rock crawling in a 4-wheel drive, and you'll see all of a sudden the trail is 20 feet wide, and there's a rock sitting right in the middle of it that everybody is driving around, either left or right.
And Moab is a very good example of that. But here, what we've done is put together a mapping system, and it started with Carsonites pretty much everywhere, and the BLM's always worked with us really well. We did have a few years that I know you felt where we had a regime that they weren't the best fit regime for recreation, in my opinion.
Correct.
And we'll get to that in a minute. But the trail system, we had a lot of markings, but it was really hard to get people around. And for a while, I think it was on purpose. The club didn't want people just running out there. They wanted to guide people in the canyon because early on, we would have people get lost out there. And we were the first call for search and rescue, which would be the sheriff's office, really, calling the cliffhangers to go out. And we would go out at night sometimes when I was a kid, and we'd be out there 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and we'd have 3 Jeeps going one direction, a couple Scouts and Broncos or whatever going a different direction, and you've got a few other guys going running point on the CB from the wash, and sometimes we didn't find them in time and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that they passed away. We just didn't find them before they walked all the way somewhere like to La Plata Highway or found Light Plant Road or something like that.
Right. And when you said Carsonite stake, just for those East Coasters that do not know what a Carsonite stake is, it's what the Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management use for trail marking, whether the trail's open, closed, that kind of thing, and it's a kind of a paddle marker. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
The canyon, so we call it the Glade Run Recreation Area or Chokecherry Canyon. We have 16 main trails from the 90s that have stuck. And what's surprising is what we were doing with the vehicles back then is still pretty difficult to vehicles today. Like, for instance, last night we had 2 of the competitors on the run I took them on roll over. And we did recoveries last night. We had to do an end over end recovery last night with 2 winches.
That was Bill, wasn't it?
Well, no, Bill actually, he rolled down. It was an interesting one. Bill rolled, he was down in a canyon. He went over backwards, and they kind of just pulled him up against a rock to where he could just start the truck and back it up.
Oh, okay,
but
good.
Chad and Megan went over backwards on the Gladiator waterfall.
Oh, wow.
And then we pulled him back over. He pulled up to it, just got a little bit of a different line, sucked his tires into the top, and it pulled him right up. And so if you don't know the Gladiator waterfall, a lot of people have seen it on TV. It stands your rig straight up and down, and it's literally 90 degrees up and down. And your tires, you just kind of wiggle your tires between the slot at the top, and it pinches them in. And once they're pinched in, you've made it. There's a big undercut at the bottom, but the front tires just suck you up.
Okay.
And it's definitely one climb that a lot of people, they want to come here, and they've got their hit list for Farmington, and it's one that's on the list usually.
Okay.
And
now you have some kind of a mapping system or something that you're using that is UPC code?
Yeah, so Glenn Donald, he took a bunch of information that Phil Collard and myself put together. Phil Collard and I, multiple times through different RMPs, would run through the canyon and do the marking, or we would do the mapping. And what we were doing when we were doing the mapping is we were grabbing, at first, one of the GPS devices from the BLM. They were some of the first people to have them, but those things were horrible. You would map your trail, and you might be on the trail, and it would show the trail like 50 feet away from you. And you knew you weren't going to be driving there because it's off a 300-foot cliff. So Glenn took all of that information. He compiled it, went out and added more to it, and then added a bunch of obstacle names and put it together in a mapping system. Matt Anthony, myself, and Glenn and a few other people put together some ratings, and we took the rating system and based it half on like Moab's rating system and half on Sand Hollow's rating system. And now we've got basically a 1 to 10 and 1 to 10 plus out here. There's definitely some trails that have never been finished, like, for instance, Kicked Up Dust. It's a new trail that Robert, one of the guys we want to get into the club because he's just such a great guy, he put together this full trail, and it is for rear steer. In fact, the Johnson Valley Crawlers were here with Dana and Robert and James from Treadworks, and they just threw the kitchen sink at the guys. So now they're going to plan a week here every year. But anyways, there's a bonus line that Lauren Healy was asking James if anybody made the bonus line, because some of the craziest trail wheelers were here this week, and nobody made the bonus line yet on KUD. So there's still some stuff that's not broke, but we haven't really labeled anything as the 11 through 15 yet. But there's probably going to be a lot of that coming.
Cool.
In fact, if you look on Instagram, there is one drop that at Jeremy on the Rocks he was dropping, and it's really not a bad drop. Your tire drops about 3-4 feet, and they're in 4-wheel steer rigs, but you're looking straight off of a 300-foot cliff. And the whole thing is it's the exposure that gets you. And the same thing at the competition. When you're here in Brown Springs and you're in one of those bowls and you're sitting at the very top and you're having to turn around at the top and your tires are hanging over the edge, it can be intimidating, to say the least.
Yes. Yeah. The stuff here at Brown Springs is the biggest stuff that we have available in the comp scene right now. At least for We Rock.
Sure. So we've finished off this mapping system, and this year, the Cliffhangers has spent a little over $5,000 on making the major signs that you see on the main road and the kiosks and stuff like that. So, Game and Fish, BLM and the Cliffhangers worked together to do it, but we used the Cliffhangers money to do it. And there have been times where we've had to spend our money on the BLM with things we didn't want to.
Oh, really? Okay.
So when around 2009, you came here, you brought We Rock, and it wasn't the best time, was it?
No, the experience was not. The competition was great. We picked a bad weekend because the weather sucked, but the relationship with the local office at the time was below par.
Well, we were having the same issue.
Okay.
We were going into meetings where they were talking about canceling motorized use in the Glade. And before it all started, the city was having kind of council meetings. And it's not the city council, but put together a council. Myself, I represented the four-wheel drive group. There were a few people from the bike community, a few people from the equestrians, a few people from the hiking community. The motorcyclists, they showed up too, and they're really the guys that were cutting a lot of this long distance stuff here way before anybody else.
Right.
And the idea was to figure out a way to move motorized use. And I just stood in front of them and said, look, if you want to move motorized use, then you need to move the 1,600 wells that are using motors to pull oil and gas out of the ground. And the BLM stood up and said, well, we can't do that. That's where our budget comes from. And that was exactly my point. But I had put together about a 14 or 16 page document. When everybody went up to talk about why they should still be in the Glade, they really only talked about themselves. And the document I put together it consisted of mapping, marking, action, and enforcement. And when we talked about mapping out the trails and stuff, it basically goes by size, and the people below you all can still be on your trail. Like, for example, if you're on a single track, that's going to be your motorcycles and your bicycles. And if you're on a 50-inch trail, that's going to be, your ATV, not really your side-by-side. And then it moves up to like 72-inch and then four-wheel drive. Well, when you get to the four-wheel drive level, everybody from an equestrian to, a bike rider or a four-wheel drive, whatever, they can all be together on the same trail. We're not going very fast when we're rock crawling in Chokecherry Canyon.
True.
So there's no reason why we can't pull up to a group of horses and just shut our engines off and maybe even have a good chat. I mean, everybody works together here. So we went through that, and I did have a big point about the equestrians. They were never represented well. They never had good areas because of different things, like wherever we might be in a recreation area, they wouldn't allow shooting. So places they would go, there would be a bunch of shooters out there. And so they wouldn't know exactly where to go and how to deal with it. So I had some proposals for that. And then as far as marking the trails, we were already doing that since the 90s. And then action and enforcement was really where it came down to the problems in the Glade. First of all, one of the mountain bike riders stood up and said that the four-wheel drive guys are the guys that are dumping out there. The four-wheel drive guys are the guys that are getting all the tickets. Well, we had secretly invited Daniel Webb, one of the sheriffs, to the event just to speak if he had to. So, well, he stood up and said the only ticket that's been issued there was of a mountain bike rider who clotheslined a kid on a four-wheeler, and his brother had to come back and wrestle him off of this kid, and he ended up getting arrested for false imprisonment of a minor.
Wow.
So needless to say, that doctor left town. And
he was a
so
doctor?
really, yeah.
Mountain bike rider that did this to a kid. Wow.
He took it really far. And I'm sure that the kids probably were doing something, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you definitely don't do what you did out there. So anyways, we're the guys that are cleaning up the canyon once or twice a year at the time. And we were known for organizing it. From the 70s on, we've always had these canyon cleanups. So to say we were dumping out there is kind of like, we're just going to go dump and pick it up later. I just had a problem with that.
Anybody in their right mind should have a problem with that.
Right. And so when it comes to action and enforcement, the action comes from the users. If you're out there and you see something going wrong, do something about it. Call me. Call, if you have to, call the sheriff, call somebody. And we'll get you with the right people. The other day, there was someone that was going and dumping out there. And the person called me and said, hey, I need JJ or Cole's number. I gave them both. They called and they got the person caught because they followed him. And so that's the kind of action we need so that we can have enforcement come in. So it's working its way out. The San Juan County has put together an app called Cleanup San Juan. And so if you basically go into your Cleanup San Juan app, you take a picture of the dump site and enter some information. And the picture, you need to have your GPS data on when you take the picture. And they'll come out, they investigate it, and then somebody else comes out and cleans it up. So that's why we're having less and less of the trash that's coming into the canyon. I think first, it's because of action and enforcement. But second, it's also because we have some people coming out and picking up individual dump sites. And to give you an example of the cleanup that we did just before Four Corners 4x4 week, which was this week, we filled 3 25-yard containers with trash when normally we would fill 6.
Oh,
so that's
nice.
An accomplishment there.
Absolutely.
And then for We Rock, we filled another 25-yard container full of sticker bushes so that we could have everybody parking and camping. Parking is really important to me. If we can't get the spectators to the event, people around here are going to be disappointed.
Right.
They love it. And you were up this year as far as attendance,
yeah,
right?
20% increase in attendance over 2019.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, it is.
And
the number of states that the people came to watch this from was amazing. I mean, we had just about all the western states covered. And that's just going off
awesome.
of our pre-ticket sales, which are electronic, so we have that data.
Sure. Yeah, so the Glade has really come around, having an active mapping system and having a lot of these signs up. I mean, we do have every now and then somebody that's driving a 4-wheel drive rig or side-by-side runs over the Carsonites or whatever, and we have to go back and place them. But now that we have this active mapping system, I mean, these things are within inches of where you're at.
Wow.
Which is beautiful. So you can get there, you can see what you're working with, and when you get onto the trails, you're seeing what kind of difficulty it is, and you can keep moving. Now, I did get told this week during fall crawl that R6s are more like an 8. So for anybody that's out here, our easiest trails are more like Moab's hardest trails. There are bypasses, though.
That's good. So the Glade is solid for years to come. It appears the Bureau of Land Management here in this area is phenomenal to work with, and
yeah, especially Jake.
Yeah, Jake McBride, the new recreational planner that we're working with, and I hope others get to work with him. Is just off the hook. The guy's on it. He's sharp. He's he loves motorized recreation, so he makes it easy, but we still have controls. So right. The promoters that organize events like we do, need to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do.
Right.
And that's anywhere we go, whether it's private land or public land, is that those being honest, being forthright, and having follow through is key, and that goes for clubs as well.
Right. Because they're going to come and check up on your post-use report. If you write a post-use report and it's not accurate, you may not get that permit next time.
Right.
And fortunately, this year, both We Rock and the Cliffhangers 4-Wheel Drive Club ended up with a 5-year permit.
Yes, that is correct.
So the Cliffhangers 4-Wheel Drive Club is talking about putting together a plan to do enough events to carry year-round insurance.
Nice. Really?
So not per event, but we would have year-round. What that does is, let's say Monster Energy wants to come and do an event in Chokecherry Canyon. They want to run it, but they need a permit and a group with insurance that can take care of it, as well as be, whether it's the guides or show people around and get them set up to where they can guide. That's a, you know, it's a big deal because they can actually come here and pay a price to the club, which would still go right back to our land use funds and operational funds and stuff like that. And marketing, don't get me wrong. We spend money on marketing. I think this year for Four Corners 4x4 Week, we were somewhere around $15,000. But we knew we had to spend that kind of money to be able to get enough people to show up. As New Mexico started pushing the mask mandates in public buildings and stuff, we had multiple clubs dropping out. So we were really pushing for those, you know, those Jeepers and buggy drivers and people that were like, okay, I'm going out there to camp. I'll go to a store and maybe wear a mask, but I'm not going to be in public buildings. I'm going out there to wheel and camp and stuff like that. So, you know, kind of one of the things that I think is just awesome about the work we've done with Game and Fish and the BLM and everything is that we have a 10 space campground out at Brown Springs with vaulted toilets, and every camp spot has its own little pavilion, has its own grill, and
level
then we
parking.
have level parking, exactly. And then we also have a pavilion that has parking, including handicap parking, and another vaulted toilet. And it's got 2 different types of skills courses. There's a big mile-long skills course for 50-inch wide and below. And then there's a flat skills course that they open up for kids to learn how to ride four-wheelers, side-by-sides, motorcycles, stuff like that. And then we have a little tiny round track inside of where everybody parks at that area. And we've cleared areas across from the campground and then across from Brown Springs so that when we have a big event like this, everybody can camp right up at the event. And I feel like it really makes everybody feel like when We Rock comes to town or Four Corners 4x4 Week is happening, that everybody's a community. Every year that we've had Fall Crawl, we have people that stay in touch and plan out what trails they're going to do at Fall Crawl together the next year, which I think is just really cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And one of the things we did this year for the competitors was if they wanted to come out on a Fall Crawl trail, they didn't have to register.
Oh, wow.
We would put them in, and they would be like either what we would call like sponsor drivers, because we allow 2 Jeep vehicles or 2 4-wheel drives or 2 buggies, whatever you want to call it, from each of our sponsors, our major sponsors, to be on the trails for both the Labor Day Invitational and Fall Crawl.
Okay.
So
excellent. So let's jump back into the beginning and some of the people that helped
sure.
open this area up, and the people that are no longer with us, that you know some of their history.
Well, let's talk about Jim Peterson. Jim Peterson, he, like I said earlier, he's the one that brought us into the Cliffhangers 4-Wheel Drive Club in 1983. And when things started really gearing up and we started seeing a lot of built Jeeps, basically around the time everybody was going to 33-inch tires and 35-inch tires, Jim started building really like just a real nice looking Jeep. And where the Jeep impression was, he would put Jimp. So built by Jimp, and it would be Jim P. And so I've been, every now and then when I get an old picture, or I use or I take a picture of the old SheJ, I use that as a hashtag. And Damon Peterson, his son, asked me the other day, what's that mean? And because he explained the story behind Jimp, and we basically explained that's exactly why we were doing that hashtag. So he was building a lot of the Wranglers around this area, and Off Again was too, and they were kind of the two competitors. But when they were off work, they were out in the canyon together with Phil Collard and people like that. But so Jim had this look, and it was a super clean look. So you knew when you saw a Jeep driving around town, if it was built by Jim Peterson, all of them had a specific build. They typically used the same tires, same rims. Most of them got a specific paint job, but it'd be, a fancy paint job in the colors that the person chose. And you just knew it was a Jim Peterson built Jeep vehicle. And back then, a lot of people in the club had a really good relationship with Frank Curry. And so the Currys would show up here and four-wheel drive, and then they showed up here when the competition started and everything. And so typically Jim would have, a set or two sets of their axles going in builds every time they showed up. So sometimes they would just bring the crates with them when they came if they could fit them, which was pretty cool.
Awesome.
Moving into all the competitions as we got into ARCA, Jim built the SheJ for Amy, and Amy drove and Jim spotted, kind of like what Jewell and I are doing today. And it was just a really good looking rig. I mean, it was orange on the front. There was kind of a triangulated flame look, and then it was outlined in yellow, but the rig was white. And it was just a beautiful rig, and it really complemented Jim's Super Jeep. But they were competing in it, so Amy would run a huge American flag off the back of the Jeep. And she had quite a few titles under her belt when she hung her helmet up.
Right.
And when she hung the helmet and steering wheel up, her husband, Steve, continued, and Jim built like one of the first, I would say, aggressive buggies around here, which Bob Barr now owns. Doug Lloyd took both the SheJ and then Blue 2 is what he called the second one, and he resurrected them. So basically they tore them completely down and put them back together as if they were new. I just saw the other day that Trail Hero posted a picture on Instagram of the original SheJ. And, of course, like I said, Bob Barr was at the competition with a different Jeep, but he does have Blue 2. And I believe he came and asked you about what it needs to compete for next year. And I think you told him just a fire extinguisher and he's good to go, right?
Correct.
So yeah, he's already got one in there, but he needs to have a couple. So at the same time that Jim was building all these rigs, Harold Off was building a lot of rigs. And because they had all of this different tooling and stuff to do fine machining for implements and different PTO shafts and stuff, they were building drive lines for stuff that you'd never imagine. I mean, little tiny U-joints on little tiny drive shafts and just weird, odd stuff that you never see anywhere else. And so they had all this tooling. Oh, and they were also they had a full motor shop. So they were doing all of these different things. So it was easy for them to bring in out of the salvage yard, like let's say you had a wrecked Camaro. They could pull the motor, stick it in a Jeep with a good built transmission, and they'd go through the motor and tune it up a little bit and just really kick out some amazing rigs. And at the same time, no, I shouldn't say at the same time as Jim, because actually Harold started earlier.
Okay.
I want to say it was the early 70s, maybe late 70s, when he made the Navajo brake system.
Okay.
So basically, this would give your CJ a brake system with about 1,800 PSI. You would eliminate your proportioning valve, and the rear brakes would go to the front of the master cylinder. The front brakes would go to the rear. And the way it was designed is that if we would get the vehicles up to about 25 miles an hour, there's like a prescription for this, and we'd go off-road at this one spot. You get to 25 miles an hour, and you'd lock up the brakes, and see if all four would lock up at the same time, and you would make your adjustments from there. And then you do the same thing at 10 miles an hour and make sure you didn't see anything different. And the Navajo brake system today still sells, I want to say they're probably selling just under 100 brake systems a month right now. Maybe that's because there's a lot of Biden bucks still out there or something.
Biden bucks. Gotta love it.
But yeah, so we had another name that doesn't come around anymore, Chip Monk.
Yep.
He used to be big into a lot of stuff, and he always had these extreme builds, like his Skittles build. And they would build some of it, but Harold would do a lot for him too. And they had a good relationship. I remember one time we went out to Combs Wash. We were down right inside of Combs Ridge, camping right by Hotel Rock and Arch Canyon. And they both brought their competition rigs. Well, actually, Chip brought Skittles. Harold brought the Pepto-Bismol Jeep. And that was his original scrambler that he competed in.
Right.
I think in 1997, he competed one event in the Violated Scrambler. And the Violated Scrambler has a unique story. He got one of the first scramblers that came off the line and immediately cut the back and bobbed it. And there were a lot of people in the scrambler community as well as just the Jeep community that were disappointed about that. But it proved to be just a really awesome four-wheel driving machine. And years later, Warren came to Off Again and did a bunch of R&D work on the Black Diamond suspension system. And so they were doing the development down here just to have different terrain than they had in Washington.
Right.
Right now, the Violated Scrambler still has that rear control arm set up where there's a bushing at the frame side that just, I mean, the end of the control arm is a bolt with bushings on either side. I took it to an event with Jeeps West, and this was years ago, and I'm driving it, and this is after Harold passed away. I was driving it, and I'd go down the side road of the freeway, and the back of the Jeep would just kind of wag its tail. And so we started playing with it there, and I tightened everything down as tight as I could. And it still just kind of liked to wag along. And if you remember this system, they ran a sway bar across the control arms, the lower control arms. You had a sway bar across them. And I don't know if that ever became problematic when you drug a rock in between there, but obviously it was over the driveline, so it probably never got hit too much. But it's an interesting setup. And the coilovers that they used were the original Fox single coil coilover. So it was an interesting build. We just took the Violated Scrambler and we put a 6.0 in it. So it's got an LQ motor in it. And the next step is we're going to correct those control arms. We're going to put, up-to-date control arms, because the geometry was great. We just need to put the tabs in and get those control arms in. So the Violated Scrambler should be going to events again. The reason I got involved with all of the Jeeps, I mean, Off Again is my family. But the reason I got involved with all the Jeeps is in 2012, I came back. Harold Off passed away in 2011. And so I had come back and I had left Off Again in 2010. And right after I left, he came down with pancreatic cancer and he was gone within a year. And in 2012, I came back. I got all of the Jeeps running. Some of them I had to pull the tank. I had to pull a fuel line. He had line running the fuel that wasn't even supposed to. You shouldn't even have fuel going through it. The upper plenums, the injectors and everything were gummed up. So I took the upper half of the motor, basically cleaned everything up, injectors, stuff like that. Replaced all the fuel lines on the Pepto-Bismol Jeep and Pinky, and then the Violated Scrambler it didn't need a whole lot. It had metal fuel line going all the way down, or stainless fuel line going all the way down the frame, so that wasn't too bad. Just having to replace a few sections and just really get it to run. But what I had done is because Harold was gone and nobody was driving the Jeeps, I started taking each of the Jeeps out to events, giving them some exercise, giving them some love, letting them go play, and then bringing them back. In 2014, a bunch of people were wanting to buy Pinky, and so the family came to me and asked us to buy it so that we could keep it in the family. And so we took our Defender 90 and sold it and bought Pinky, and that's how we ended up with Pinky.
Okay.
The Pepto-Bismol Jeep, RTZ Off-Road, Julian from Italy.
Right.
He came and picked up the Pepto-Bismol Jeep and gave Phyllis a price she agreed to. He shipped it to Italy and never paid for it.
Oh, really?
So there's people that Harold ran with, like Walker Evans and Jim Sims and John Bundy and people like that if they saw the guy, he'd probably
regret his actions.
Regret it, I would say so. I'm very disappointed that happened. But to do that to a widow right after, her husband dies is just crazy. I mean, it was within a year he stole that Jeep.
Huh. And it's over in Italy.
I believe so, because that's the last I heard is it was seen in Italy. And I'm not sure what the heck he was doing with it, because he used to take Harold's designs and he would put them in his booth at Easter Jeep Safari, and that would be, he would show it as his suspension system with RTZ Off-Road. And I would see it there, and he would have it flexed out, and he'd have like price tags on stuff. And he put a suspension system on my 2000 TJ that we call the Cheeto. It's been around for a long time. I can't believe how many people know the Cheeto. But we go to SEMA, and it was the coolest thing. I mean, I can't remember what the award was at SEMA with it. It was just out front as a featured vehicle. And it was an okay system, but for some reason the way the geometry worked, and it was basically a 4-link with radius arms in the rear and a 3-link with radius arms in the front. And I noted that a lot of people that we had put the system on for were breaking control arms. So I started cutting them down to see what was going on, and I could not figure it out because he was using quarter wall tubing and like some pretty strong stuff. It was like 1 3/4 quarter wall tubing, and but for some reason, right behind where the radius arm came off, they were breaking. So it had to do something with axle wrap and geometry, I would imagine.
Right.
But I took that suspension system off right away, and Harold and I just kind of slapped together what we thought would work, and really did work, and that was pretty cool. But so my experience at Off Again, I came into Off Again thinking I knew everything about Jeep, and I knew how I was going to fix every Jeep. And I was known to be pretty good at fixing Jeeps out on the trail, because people break out here a lot, and I usually carried enough tooling to get people in. We could pull an axle shaft, we could take links off and get chain falls going both ways to hold the axle in place, whatever it took. And I came in and I would get a Jeep to work on, because I was a sales and service manager, but Harold was having me there to do the planning and the builds, because he didn't trust some of the mechanics at the shop to do a lot of the things. So after hours, I would work on people's vehicles, and he treated me well for that. But when we had a vehicle come in that had something wrong, he would tell me to fix something, and I would argue with him. And I told Pat Gramillion this story one time. And so about 6 months goes by of me just going, okay, I'm not going to argue with Harold. I'm going to do what he says, and then we'll go on a ride. And if it didn't fix it, we'll work on the next piece. And it got to be to where we would go on a ride together when the Jeep would come in, and Harold would say, okay, Rick, what do you think it is? And I would tell him, I'm going to check, bushings, Heims, and maybe a carrier or something like that. We might have a rattle or something weird. And so he'd say, okay, come to the office and check in with me when you've checked all that, and we'll come up with a plan. Well, it started getting to where he just let me loose on all of the Jeeps that he had built that would come in. Walker came in one time, Walker Evans, and he needed a new steering column. So I was in the back, got him a new steering column, had my steering column mechanic go through it, make sure everything was freshened up, all the bearings, everything. We slapped that thing in. We had a new steering column in Walker's rig, I want to say within an hour and a half, fully rebuilt inside and out. And Harold wouldn't let him pay. So Walker walks out the front door, comes back through the garage, and puts $400 in my pocket. And he goes, put that in the drawer. And so I snuck it in the drawer. And when Harold didn't want to take money from you, he would take offense if you gave him money. And he took offense that day. But what was really cool when like Phyllis and some of the other girls, so Phyllis and Phyllis would get together, and Jan Gramillion, and they would get together and they'd go upstairs in Off Again, and there were a bunch of kachinas and a lot of old Indian art and stuff like that. And they would like kind of, all the ladies would be buying, selling, and trading together within their circle. So they always had stuff to do. Like, for instance, this year, if Pat and Jan had showed up to Easter Jeep Safari, Phyllis would have come up and spent the day with them. Like, she'll drive 3 hours just to spend a day with the ladies and then drive back 3 hours.
Right.
So yeah, there was just such a close relationship. And when it comes to the Rat Pack, which was a lot of those names I mentioned, some of them are big names, but they all had this really close relationship. And Pat Gramillion told me that Harold was like the glue. He was like the chairman. And what you had was some of the guys, and maybe they were from California or somewhere, that were more liberal, and some of the guys were more conservative. And they would get in these arguments, and Harold would get in the middle of the arguments and say, look, we're out here to have fun together. We're friends. This stuff doesn't separate us because we have common ground. So basically, shut your faces and let's go wheeling. And Harold was very stern with everybody. And when Harold passed away, basically Pat was telling me, things just kind of fell apart. You see Walker wheeling with people that, in my opinion, some of the people know real well, but some people that wheel with him, they might be spotting him in his older age, and just they don't know. They really have to get a hold of Walker. Like, there was one time I know the people that were with him know him really well and everything, but he drove like up the crack, the Devil's Crack on Moab Rim, and then drove off the end of it almost like, I mean, one tire was hanging off the edge.
Oh yeah, instead of going right, he kept going straight.
Exactly.
Right.
And
that was in the evening, wasn't it, too?
Yeah, it was in the evening, but I mean, with Walker, and the same thing happens with one of our club members. With Walker, my understanding from Harold was you had to like basically almost yell at him, "Hey, stop. And because Walker was a good driver. He could creep and crawl, and I mean, in his competing days, he would really throw down on some of these climbs.
He won a championship with Cal Rocks.
Yeah, and so he brought some really interesting vehicles here, and a lot of those vehicles we saw inside of Off Again. It might be just the little things, but we gotta play with a lot of those rigs, which was pretty cool. So after Harold passed away, a lot of us have really felt him not being around. The same thing with Jim Peterson. It's just different in this area. And when my dad passed away in 2004, Dad was doing a lot of the land use stuff with Phil. Dad was helping Phil with any side stuff that he needed to do when Phil was setting up ARCA courses, UROC courses, and stuff like that. Mom and Dad would always go with Phil Collard to some of those areas, and like Cedar City or Delta or wherever they were going to go. I don't even know if they hit Delta, but Cedar City for sure. Here, Las Cruces, whenever there was going to be a competition, Dad would usually wrangle up the judges. And that's kind of what I do now too. I guess a lot of the things that Dad did, I've been doing, I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?
No, it doesn't. No matter how much the kids may say otherwise at times, they don't.
Yeah. And I enjoy it. I really do enjoy working on the land stuff and all of that stuff. And, one of the things when I was doing the RMP, after I put together the document at the city forum, when we got together, they did the little council. That council got crushed right away because, everybody was me. Nobody was willing to work together. So later on, the BLM started their RMP process. And with the club, they were really pushing hard on us. They were putting their thumb down on the club. And at that time, we were the bad guys to the club. And this is around the time that you guys first started showing up with We Rock.
Right.
And so we hired Jim Cooper, and we ended up spending about $10,000. But the thing that the BLM will do is throw a bunch of acronyms, which turns into a bunch of jargon that you don't understand. And you really got to dig in to like the NEPA process, which is the National Environmental Protection Act. You got to look at that process that's written into that act, and you've got to find all this jargon. But the acronyms aren't spelled out there. They've just made these acronyms over the years, and we didn't understand what we were talking about sometimes. The BLM invited us to the BLM office, and they said, we only need a few people to come. We're talking about what we're going to do with the Glade. And one of the options, there was like an A, B, and C. One of the options was to close the Glade for motorized use.
Unacceptable.
So right. It was unacceptable. We had already discussed it at that forum with the city. So now we had to do it again with the BLM, even though the BLM was present in the other forum. So we didn't hold back. We brought in people. We had people drive down from Canada. We had people coming in from California. A bunch of people showed up, and they decided they were just going to go wheeling in the canyon and make a big event out there without a permit as a protest. And all of those people showed up in that room. That room was standing room only, and it was a big kind of like amphitheater kind of setup that the BLM had in their office at the time. Like, it's multiple stairs. I think it was a training room or something, but we filled that room. So they knew right then and there what was going on. And the funny thing is, our club was very much, I'm not going to name the groups that we were paying into, but we were taking club money each year, and multiple members were also signing up with these groups that supposedly help with motorized use. And we're putting a bunch of money into them. When we reached out to the groups we put the most money into to help us with paying Cooper and getting all of the stuff lined out and everything, and then also getting even comments in for the comment period, it was like crickets. They weren't even there. I was so disappointed. I reached out to a friend that all of us know really well, who's gone all over the place with one of these groups. And I was like, I told you this was coming, and what's going on? And he's like, Rick, it's out of my control. I go around all these events and I promote the group, but all of this is, higher above me. And if they're not pushing for a comment period, then they've got a reason to do that. So the club stopped supporting those groups, and we continued supporting our own four-wheeling efforts here. So now, because of these events, we keep locked away a specific amount of money, and it goes up every year because of legal costs, what they're going to be. Lawyers cost more and more every year.
Yep.
But we keep this specific amount of money aside in case we ever get into a situation again.
Good. I think you're good right now with the group that's in there. And even the regional and the directors up higher. There was some of those out here this last weekend, and they really loved what they were seeing with our event, at least. And I praised you guys and what's been done out here in their office and everything. So, yeah.
There was one thing that still hits me a little hard is Rick Fields passed away, and he was the head of the Farmington field office. He was diagnosed with cancer and gone within a few months.
Right.
And he was very close to our club. And we're very sad to lose such somebody that was just so much into just all of the uses. And I mean, we're talking even minerals and stuff like that. Just what a great guy. He protected the ARC sites, but he didn't overprotect them like we've seen in Las Cruces. Our ARC sites are marked, and they're all not marked so people can go and just trample on them, but they're marked for basically for reasons that you can't get into them and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
So
the areas out here are basically fenced off now.
Yeah. Out at Brown Springs, especially because we're getting such traffic out there.
Yes.
No matter what group you're in, you're going to have that 1 to 5%. They're going to drive cross country over, maybe a burial ground, or, do something crazy that most people won't do.
Correct.
We see that every year. We've even got a 1 to 5er that shows up at the downtown takeover, the off-road downtown takeover. And
we talked about that.
Yeah, it's time to kind of start changing our rules for coming to that event. But the Four Corners 4x4 week has grown. This is the 11th year, but really it was a redo for year 10 because we lost 2020. And it's grown so much. And when We Rock came back, I mean, you are not going to come back. And it took a phone call from Doug McKim, who was just above the recreational management planning position at the time, but filling in for those duties. You weren't going to come back, but when you did, it gave the club an opportunity to take the downtown deal that was called Fall Crawl a long time ago and make Fall Crawl four-wheeling in the Glade and turn the show into the Off-Road Downtown Takeover.
Correct.
And we've done everything we can to make it exciting. I mean, we send trailers out to the comp site, and we'll pick those drivers up, and then a couple hours before the show ends, we'll take them back, but they still get to be part of the party. They get to have a beer and hang out and do things. And they put on a good show right alongside of the 4x4 car show and the vendors and the flex ramp. And we try to put them right up next to the flex ramp because that's where all the people are.
Right.
And so they get to watch the action and they don't have to leave their rig. And also you get so many people just in and around the rigs that it works out really well.
I remember the first year we came back and we did that, there was some teams that were like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. That's dumb. And then they couldn't see beyond their nose basically. And
right.
Everybody came back from down there and they saw pictures and heard the stories and, what they missed out on. Now nobody misses out on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we got guys like Randall and Dave. They drove a big trailer down with both rigs in it.
Yes.
And I think it was both of their first year to be there. And man, seeing those two show up was like, I don't know, for me was huge. I mean, I have worked really hard on this event with Alan Elmore, and this year I lost Alan. And so I had to put everything together and then just hand certain things that I couldn't take care of while I'm doing my daily business. And I'd have it all set up and I'd have them knock it down. And Caleb Kern, I mean, if it wasn't for him, a lot of this wouldn't be going on because he was in town to get the paperwork into who they needed to get it into, setting up the insurance and stuff. And he's the one that has spearheaded for the club the availability to get year-round insurance and came up with the idea. So I think that's going to sell as far as the club and will be hopefully a bonus for other groups coming to the area if they want to have an event.
True. That's awesome.
So,
yeah, Caleb did a good job working with Shelley as well on various things with around the event and your guys' event and our event, the coordination. Good.
Yeah, so and then we also have this raffle that we put on, and Cody Thomason really he spearheads that. There's Black Bear Unlimited reached out to a bunch of manufacturers and got a bunch of stuff coming in, but Cody Thomason he really brings in a lot as well, and he organizes all of it for the raffle. And I want to say this year we sold 700 raffle tickets, and most of them were sold on site at the Off-Road Downtown Takeover.
Wow. Excellent.
I think before we had just 300 tickets that, the club had sold before that. But the fact that 400 more tickets sold at the show, that's just, beyond what I expected.
Right.
So
awesome. So let's talk about Rick.
All right.
Your what you do when you're not wheeling, and then we can talk about a little bit about your daughter as well.
Sure.
The one that's wheeling, that is the one I mean. Yes.
So I am a regional manager for our Southern Territory with Northwest Instruments and Controls. I take care of a lot of plants, power plants, refineries, midstream gas plants. I take care of pharmaceutical manufacturers, breweries, food manufacturers. In fact, Leprino Cheese is a good customer of ours. Molson Coors is a very big customer of ours.
Really?
But what's that?
I said, oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. We've got two power plants here. One coal-fired power plant that's about to close down, P&M San Juan. Unfortunately, we were losing 1,800 megawatts of generation there. We've got APS Four Corners, which is on the Navajo Reservation. They're a huge customer of mine. In fact, today, just before your call, we just got, I want to say, a little over $250,000 order that I've been working on for years.
Nice.
So that's what I do. I regionally manage Utah, New Mexico, Arizona. I take care of Southern Colorado, West Texas, Nevada, and Northern California right now. We are growing into Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. We cover Montana, Wyoming, and all of Colorado, North Dakota, South Dakota. So we have a pretty big footprint for Northwest Instruments and a very small group of employees, which is kind of nice. I want to say, we're a $20 to $30 million a year company, so we're not super huge, but we do very unique things. Just about everybody in every piece of the territory that I just told you that has a hydrogen-cooled generator, we're taking care of their hydrogen and making sure that it's safe.
Nice.
And that's just one, for instance. And then one of the major brands for continuous emissions monitoring, or manufacturers, I should say, we're basically their go-to for anybody that doesn't have an internal account. So if you are buying this manufacturer, you have to go through us. So that's all taken care of by territory and stuff like that. So it's kind of neat. I get to drive around, and I go to some of the neatest places. I get into some of the craziest mechanical design and do a bunch of programmable logic programming flow meters, and just setting stuff up for customers. And that's not my job, but I think a lot of people know how I am. If I sell you something, I'll help you fix it or put it together. With my customers, if I sell it to them and they need a little training, I'll come and do it just because they bought it. And I've always lived with a mindset when building a Jeep, or maybe putting a de-superheater in a power plant or something like that. I'm worried about what I put in there for the next 20 years. And I have not been with the company for 20 years. So there's a lot of equipment that I've sold over the years that I check on it all the time. And I was the same way with my Jeep builds. Typically, if you got a brand new Jeep and you had brought it to me and we did a little bit of planning and we got the stuff in and we put it all together, you'd get a phone call from me probably about a month later, and I'd say, are you hearing any new noises? How does the Jeep feel? Are you liking it? And can you bring it in for a retorque? And I do the same thing in this business today. And the way I got headhunted into this company is they were asking people who they should hire, and mainly they'd be looking for instrumentation, electrical techs, or engineers. And a bunch of the guys at the plants here locally, because these are some of our biggest customers, were basically saying, you need to find Rick Jenkins, because not only does he have a good mechanical aptitude, he also is very into his customers and very interested in their satisfaction. So they called me. They interviewed everybody one time. They interviewed me 5 times to figure out if they could take a guy that was in the print advertising industry and make him an instrumentation and control salesman. So my territory at the time was just northern New Mexico, and it was bringing in about like $280,000 a year. I came in the middle of May, and to December, I did $800,000. So they're like, okay, this is the right guy. We can grow with him. So some unique things within the business. We fly into Houston. I'm with the vice president, and it's my first training, and we decide one night, let's go downtown. And so we walk in the doors of the Hyatt, and there's 3 guys there, and I'm wearing my Super Chip shirt. There's 3 guys there going, Rick! And he's looking at me like, what the heck? And we're right next to the Enterprise building. Well, it just happened to be that the Enterprise guys that I work with around the country were all having a meeting there. So they brought myself and the vice president in. And if we didn't have to drive anywhere, if we were staying at the Hyatt, they would have had us so driven into the ground where we wouldn't have been able to, with drinks, to go to work the next morning, you know. But it's happened over and over. I flew into Florida for an all hands meeting in 2013, and I was telling Jim McGinn with Super Chips that I couldn't, he was at RMI Atlanta at the time, but he was working for Super Chips and he needed me to do some statements. And I told him I didn't think I could because I was going to stay at SeaWorld in Florida. And he goes, oh, okay. You know, well, somehow they figured it out when we were getting out one night, and we're all walking out. It's a group of people from all over the country that were pushing this specific manufacturer. They were representing, I should say, not pushing. We walk out, and this lime green Jeep pulls up that's all built and everything. And they basically say, where's Rick Jenkins? And it was unique because I was chosen to be a leader of one of the groups. We had 4 groups that we split, a few thousand people into, and I was the leader of one of the groups. And so there were a bunch of people in that group going, oh, he's walking out like right behind us. Here he is. And the employees of my company are like, what the heck is going on here? So we went out with the guys from Super Chips, and they took me out for Italian, and we hung out, and I got to meet the president of the company. And this was before PowerTech bought them. And it was almost right after that PowerTech bought Super Chips. But we had a really good time. They brought me back, and everybody just wanted to hear the stories. And I'm like, well, there's not really much to tell. I mean, I went out and had some drinks and had some Italian with the guys, and, we just talked shop. And so that was a good time. But it happened again when we flew into Boston. We landed, and some of my friends that coincidentally put my wife up when we had Jewell, she was 7.5 weeks early. So they gave her a room and a truck for a month while she would drive back and forth to the hospital every day. And they just happened to be getting off the plane as we're getting off the plane. And the company's like, why is it that every time we go somewhere with you, pretty much within the first few days, you're running into people, And I think, that happens to a lot of people in our community because we get to know people all over the place, which I think is awesome. That we meet so many people from so many places because of the unique things we do, right? I mean, people that have 4-wheel drive vehicles, it's something like 3% of that group even uses the 4-wheel drive functionality of the vehicle or something like that. So turn that towards Jeep and Ford Bronco now and stuff like that. That they're even more it's more of a niche group because they're not just using 4-wheel drive functionality to drive in the ice or snow or to get to the back fence of the farm. They're using these vehicles. A lot of people are to go out off-road and be on an adventure. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, exactly. So that, this business has been good to me. It has allowed me to compete and race. I was racing with 4 Corners 4x4, and we started with the Everyman Challenge and raced Dirt Riot for years and enjoyed every bit of it. I went all over the place with Dirt Riot, and the cool thing about it was when I came to the company, I said, look, I'm coming on in 2012. I just started the season, and I said, hey, I'm committed to this racing. And they said, well, we'll take a look at it. If your numbers are good and they don't drop because you're doing this racing thing, then we'll continue this. And what happened was I think the biggest one, it was every time I went away on a Dirt Riot trip, I'd be sitting in the passenger seat and have my little hotspot, and I'd be like reaching out to all my customers that I wasn't talking to because I'm really trying to push new business or new quotes or whatever. So I would go to close old quotes, and a lot of them would be like, oh shoot, I need to have that here by October. How many weeks out is it? You know, that kind of thing. And so I'd get all these POs. So after the first couple of trips, the CEO calls me and says, hey, you want to go on vacation, be my guest. You can go as long as you want. You go, the kind of money you bring in when you're on vacation is ridiculous. In 2015, we were going to Goldendale, Washington, because what we wanted to do is take a 4600 car. And what we're trying to do is help the We Rock mod stock class.
Right.
There's one East Coast driver and us. And what we're trying to do is show all the 4600 drivers that they could take that rig that they built for 4600 class, and we could all go out and compete in We Rock. And one of the points that we were trying to make is that it was a lot less money to run rock crawling than it was to race. And so some of the guys were just dropping off with their 4600 cars, not coming to Dirt Riot, not coming to Ultra 4 anymore. And so we were like, hey, you still have your car? Let's go do this. So we're on our way to Goldendale, Washington. And I want to say on the trip there and the trip back, I had done about $250,000 in business. And so after that, the company was like, okay, so you're going to become a regional manager. You're going to teach people to do what you do. And if you're away or you're here, it doesn't matter. We know you like to see your customers. So we know you're going to regularly see your customers. So, you know, I have basically an open schedule for doing the 4-wheel drive stuff. Now, don't get me wrong. When I'm 4-wheeling in certain places, like we just finished We Rock yesterday.
Right.
Wednesday, we drive to Ouray because our family puts on the Ouray Jeep Jamboree for Jeep Jamboree. My sister and my brother-in-law, so Julie and Tori, they work for the corporate office with Jeep Jamboree. And then we have a few other things that we do. For Jeep, we're going to be putting on some of the Jeep adventures. For customers, I think it's more of a legacy customer that we're going to have. So they may be a little bit older and stuff like that, but good customers to the Jeep brand.
Right.
But that's some cool stuff. But we're going directly there this Wednesday. I think we've got a couple weeks off. We go to Trail Hero, a couple weeks off. We have the Moab Jeep Jamboree, and then we go right into one of the Jeep adventures. And I think our season pretty much ends there. But with the start of the We Rock season to basically the very last week of October, that's our main season for doing what we do.
Yeah, that's pretty much what mine is. Ours goes through the end of SEMA. You know, because we always go to SEMA. That's where we get to meet our partners and make sure that they're happy and, you know, hopefully introduce ourselves to potential new partners, that kind of thing. So.
Right.
Excellent.
So as far as, you know, growing up, the best part of growing up here, Dad loved to explore. I mean, we were not home most weekends of the year. I mean, if it was not like, you know, too rough a weather to get out, like even in the snow, we'd be going places. And we still do. If you watch videos on the 4x4 Tricks YouTube channel and go to like the Chokecherry Canyon playlist, you can definitely see a video called There's No Fun Like Snow Fun. And we shoot these walls out here in the snow, and it is a blast. Because usually, even if you slide down a wall sideways, you don't roll, unless you're Matt Anthony. I think when he was club president, he ended up laying it over because he was on snow and just caught the smallest patch of melted off slick rock. And it just popped his Jeep on the side, but he had come off a big wall sideways. But it's really cool because we have such a great area and we're so close to so much action. You know, the San Juan Mountains, we're 80 miles from Silverton, Colorado, 100 miles from Ouray. We're 170 miles from Moab, and like Arch Canyon, Combs Ridge, Combs Wash, the campground down there. That's about an hour and 40 minutes from my door.
Nice.
So those are places that we would go, and we would. Dad was a history buff, so we would be looking at railroads, mines, mining towns, ancient ruins, and petroglyphs and stuff like that. He loved the Southwest. We would do California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, pieces of Texas, Colorado, a lot of Colorado. And we just really had a good upbringing, not only with the off-road lifestyle, but also just being outdoors and understanding what to look out for and what to do if something happens. And so as we joined the Cliffhangers, it couldn't have been any better, because there was a bunch of kids, like the Jeep dealer here, Steve Malloy. They were in the Jeep Club. They had kids my age. James Walden and Nancy Walden had kids my age. So, I mean, between like Lindsay Amix now, but Lindsay Malloy and a few of the other kids that were running around with us, we had this group of kids that were always together, and we still are really good friends. And my dad had this saying, "See you around like a donut." So if you were leaving, he'd say to the kids, "See you around like a donut." Today, if you told any of those kids that, like Amy Peterson and Lindsay Amix and Melissa Walden, if you told them that, you might bring a tear to their eye, because there were certain things that Dad did for the kids. We would show up in Silverton, Colorado to camp in South Mineral Creek, and our whole club would show up. But we would have a group that would show up Thursday night, and we usually did that, and we'd wheel Friday, and then a group that show up Saturday night that had to be late because of work or whatever, and then everybody would go home Sunday. Well, we'd do Black Bear and Imogene on Friday, and then the next group that showed up wanted to do Black Bear and Imogene Saturday. So that trail for our family got really just overrun. We'd like run it, once a visit. We'd be there 8 weekends or 9 weekends, out of the season. And, running Black Bear and Imogene all the time. Yeah, it's great exposure, crazy trail. But for us, you're running it all the time. It gets really boring.
Right.
And Dad was the type of guy that if there was a road that he saw that he hadn't driven down, he had to do it. And when he passed away, I ended up with maps with thousands of archaeological sites marked, huge maps that would cover your wall. And so it was a cool thing, because he would write about all the stuff that he was driving down and what he found and stuff like that. In fact, he used to write funny poems and stories for four-wheel drive and sport utility. And I want to try and find one and share it soon, to see if I can find some of his old stories and share them, because they're still funny today. It's all about camping and four-wheeling and stuff like that.
And the stuff that happens, right?
So when we would do these Black Bear Imogene trips, the second day, Dad would get all the kids together and maybe one more driver, and we would pile in the Jeeps, and we would go a different direction. And we had a few areas that Dad always had, these secret areas that we'd go to. And one of them was this big, like, crack that somebody had scooped out looking for a vein, gold vein. And in this crack, there's a bunch of quartz crystal just sticking out like teeth, and you can literally just pull the quartz out of the wall like teeth. And they're nice big crystals and everything. So us kids would all come back to camp with like bright orange pockets because of all the iron and everything and the rocks up there. And I mean, our pockets would be full. We'd bring like sweaters with pouches just so we could carry more stuff. And we all would go home with stuff that, who knew where we were going to put all these crystals and stuff like that. So a lot of them ended up in the yard, in the garden, or wherever, for each of the families. But Dad was always the person that wanted to do stuff with the kids. And that's kind of what I do now. Like last night, I had two girls that have both been in rollovers in four-wheel drive vehicles. And basically, they weren't going to ride in a vehicle. They were going to walk each obstacle and then just ride in the washes and stuff. I grabbed both of them and put them in Pinky, and we drove down a big wall and came up kind of a side climb and then did a nice big climb, and I talked them through it, and we did it inch by inch. And one of the girls came up to me this morning when I was checking up and grabbing trash for We Rock and taking it out. She thanked me because she felt a lot more comfortable in vehicles. And she said, I have to be honest, I saw more rollovers yesterday than I've ever seen in my life. She was at We Rock. She saw the rollovers there. She was watching Jewell. Jewell had her endo. And then Bill rolled last night. Chad rolled last night. So it was just a funny thing. So that's something that, that I love to do too. I try to get all the kids together and really do what Dad did, because you're not going to grow the sport without those kids, and they're very important to the sport for sure. And we're seeing it in these 4-wheel drive clubs. A lot of these older guys are falling out, and the younger guys don't want anything to do with the 4-wheel drive clubs anymore. And in my opinion, in the 80s and 90s, the 4-wheel drive clubs were the backbone of 4-wheel driving across the country. If something was going to get done, it took a pool of members to create a good account to be able to pay and handle some of the hours and logistics and the money.
True.
So that's huge. And, so we started going to Moab shortly after my sister was born. We joined the club before my sister was born. She was born in 1984. Shortly after she was born, we started going to Moab. In around 1986, we started gunning and leading trails there. And back then, there was probably about 15 families that really put the whole Easter Jeep Safari together.
Right.
And so we became one of those main families. And we had a group of families that was called The Family. And we would take a couple weeks every year and go somewhere. But going to Moab and putting it together, all of the kids of these 15 families, like you look at the McElhaney's, Doug and Karma, their son Jeremy, he is a major part. He's been a past president multiple times and has done a lot for the club. And, we've got Ron and Linda Brewer, their son Eric Brewer, who passed away a while back. They were all people who were doing things for the club, pushing them in the right direction. And we do have a lot of the older members that are still in office, still doing the stuff. If you get a registration at the Easter Jeep Safari, it's because of Ron and Linda Brewer. If you're at the vendor show, that's because of Doug and Karma. But Karma, she does so much work for the event. It's ridiculous. And knowing her very well as a family member, and I say a close friend, close family member, she does not sleep for 2 weeks before the event and does not sleep during the event. Like, she goes to bed, but she's a very restless person, and she's just worried about something going wrong. And growing up with that group taught me a lot about what we do now. If I didn't know Ron and Linda and Doug and Karma and some of the other people that put a lot of the background stuff together, I wouldn't know what I know to put together Four Corners 4x4 week. And so now you've got, maybe over 900 members, associate members to the Red Rock Four Wheelers. Mom has stepped down from leading trails. Now my sister Julie, she has some trails she leads and guns on, and I have trails I lead and gun on. I think next year I'm on for Escalator to Hell on Sunday. I'll be tail gunning. Monday I'll be tail gunning on Hell's Revenge. Wednesday, here's an interesting story about this trail. Wednesday I'm going to mid gun for my sister on Tiptoe Through Hell. Friday, I lead late start steel bender, and then I am one of the big Saturday trail leaders. I lead Gold Bar Rim, and Mom had passed that down to me. And I think some of the club members were disappointed about it, but I can tell you, I have been picking up trash in the Moab area since I was 5 years old, and I have created some major trash piles to fill into trucks and stuff like that. So they were very happy to give it to me, and nobody was going to argue per the president, from what I heard.
Good.
But so Tiptoe Through Hell, around 1991, if you were driving a vehicle without lockers, you couldn't do Hell's Revenge. You were not allowed to sign up for it per the BLM because of the rollovers on Tip Over Challenge and Rubble Trouble. So what Dad proposed to the BLM was he would take those 2 climbs out and call it a tiptoe version. The following year, they allowed him to do it. And so from that year on, we've had the Tiptoe Through Hell Trail. And a lot of people don't see it. They need to mark the little calendar that Hell's Revenge is being run that Wednesday, because they don't mark it that way. They show it as running Tiptoe Through Hell. So we have a ton of vendors that'll get in front of us. And we've got sometimes 50 rigs. And they'll just stop and they won't get out of our way. So we have to go up and say, look, we have the permit for the trail. Do we need to call the sheriff? Can you guys please just let us by? And they're, oh, we're in the middle of a photo shoot or whatever. It's gotten better over the years, but, because they don't show Hell's Revenge going, they give us a lot of grief when we're leading the trail, and sometimes cause a little bit of off-trail driving that I see out there as well. When some of the side-by-sides come through, they're doing a photo shoot. Those guys will just keep on buzzing along. They don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not saying all side-by-sides, by the way. We're still back to the 1 to 5.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I enjoy every bit of what I do there. I work very hard for the Red Rock four-wheelers. For about a decade, I helped put on the vendor show there. What was unique, I guess, to the drivers of the trucks is I would show up, I would collect money, collect prizes, make sure everybody was doing okay. And for like Advanced Adapters or some of the other companies, if they had something in their trailer, I would have the Rover, I would have their keys. I knew their part number systems really well because of working it off again. So I could go in and grab a transfer case off of the trailer to bring up to the counter, or if it was a transfer case like the Red Rock version of the Atlas transfer case, I would bring that stuff to the table or the stage that they have up front where they put all the prizes and stuff. But I had a great time with a lot of the vendors. I met a lot of manufacturers that I still know the people from those manufacturers today.
Right.
I think I just saw Trent got a new job. He was with Daystar forever, and I can't remember what the job was, but I always liked that guy. He just, he always grabbed me aside and, it'd be like giving me noogies. No, I'm just kidding. But no, there's a lot of those guys, a lot of those manufacturers, like for instance, Tom Allen with PSC.
Right.
He always saw how hard I worked out there and everything. And there were a few years where he would just, 1 year he knew I had the Cheeto. He knew I needed some stuff. So he just gave me a $200 gift card. And he's like, here, call in, because I don't know how much you need to spend, but here's a couple $100. And it covered every bit of what I needed, which was really cool. And today he's helping Jewell out. And
Nice.
I'm hoping that Randall continues, because now that Randall's taken over, but he knows Jewell. And I know Rachel doesn't work for the company, but she's been doing a lot of the media stuff and for PSC. And so I'm hoping they stick together. But all of these guys saw really what we were doing, and just neat people. And I wasn't just that dorky kid that is just one of those guys at the Red Rock four-wheeler event, trying to help everybody out. It was they really treated me like I was a family member, which was really cool.
Excellent. So let's talk about Jewell and the opportunity that's facing her now.
Yeah, so we've been, well,
You can back
okay,
up.
so, yeah,
Introduce.
I'm going to back up to, so we've got Pinky. 2018, I ran the Grand Nationals with Tori, my brother-in-law.
Yep.
And Tori Cortez and myself, we ran the Grand Nationals. Tori spotted for me, and if anybody wheeled with Pinky back in the day, that thing, if it touched a pebble, it would lift a tire. And it always just had a hard time wheeling, some of the lines that we would have at competition. Because even after competition, when I first got it, I would take it out and run all the lines and try to run the big lines and stuff. And Jewell did the same later on. But after that competition, Jewell asked her Tio first, meaning uncle. She said, Tio, can I do rock crawling competitively as a high school sport? And he knew exactly what she was asking. And he said, if you get straight A's and you do everything your mom wants before she asks, I'll be your fabricator. So she knew what she needed ahead of time. She'd been watching the sport, studying the sport, and I didn't know. I didn't know that she was really that into it. So they both came to me and said, we want you to spot and Jewell to drive and start competing, and she wants to do that for her high school sport. So sure enough, she's got straight A's. We're coming home. The whole house is clean. And so, yeah, we're right into it. I think we put maybe about 30 grand into our first year because we had a lot of work to do. We had to get the complete underside of Pinky and get stuff going, and then go to the first competition, figure out what was wrong, come back, redo some of it. The first competition was crazy because Jewell pulls on to her first course within the first gate, and she's pulling up a rock, and she's turned all passenger, and I told her to straighten out and come forward. Well, she just blipped the gas pedal and flipped it up in the air, and it went off of about a 10-foot edge. It lands on the ground and ends up on its lid. Well, when it ended up on its lid, it had broken the engine cage on the driver's side. So we got it off the course. Pinky has a Premier Power Welder in it, thanks to Pac Vermillion. And so we got the leads and the stick from another competitor because I didn't have my pack with me that I carry for the Premier Power Welder. And we had to re-weld the cage back together and get the area that held the shock tabs all just basically reworked and welded back together so that we could actually hold up the driver's side of the vehicle. And back then, if you look at Pinky, it had these kind of weird wings that came out, like a little triangulated type wing to keep the body off of the rocks, or really keep the fiberglass hood off of the rocks.
Right.
Well, one of them was up and one of them was down. So that was kind of funny. And so Jewell and Tall Jack, who is also here this weekend for We Rock, Jewell and Tall Jack would run over to Tacoma and ask for oil. And then we're all done. We got oil in it. We're trying to start it. We find a broken spark plug. So back to Tacoma and get a spark plug and everything. So we got it all welded back together and fixed. And we were on course, right in line with our breakdown time to basically go on to the next course. We didn't miss a course, which was really cool. And a lot of it was because of Tall Jack and Jason Kaminsky. They really worked it as far as grinding, cutting, just getting it done while we ran around and found parts and then got it welded back together. So she went through that day. The last course, we're on like gate 3, and she's complaining. Her arms are hurting, her legs are hurting. She couldn't figure out what's going on. And I'm just telling her, I'm like, look, you have 2 more gates and the finish gate. Just come back through that gate and come on down. And she steers it through the gates off of the course, and she just shuts it off and gets out. And I'm like, okay, take a break and I'll jump in Pinky. So I jumped in Pinky. I could not steer the thing. She had some kind of adrenaline going through her body to where she was steering that thing. I had to basically have somebody winch the front end of Pinky around, get it moving, and I just kept forcing the steering, and I was only getting inches. So we drug it down, we put it on the trailer, and Jewell said, Dad, we don't need to go home tomorrow. Let's stay and help judge, because they're short judges. And her idea was if we help judge, we might be able to hear how drivers and spotters are talking to each other. And she got a really good view of the big picture there, and I did too. So fast forward to last year, we went to one East Coast event and all of the West Coast events. And the Sportsman B class that we're in, there's a lot of people that just have a nice lighter weight tube chassis, summer pro mod style buggies, and we're in a full frame, full body. And you guys had created the class to have this drag axle class, because in the Sportsman, it was mixed between rear steer and the drag axle. And so what we found is that the Sportsman B class became the biggest class.
Yes, it did.
In Sportsman. So it was really cool having, this young girl. She's 15 years old at the time. And she runs through the entire season. And Baghdad, we had 25 competitors. And what was really cool is, she was close to the top. And she was hitting podium and stuff like that. So it was really neat to see that. Well, at the end of the year, we won the season. And this year, as a 16-year-old, she won the season again. So she's been wanting to run unlimited really bad. We left Cedar City Grand Nationals 2020, and we're going back to our condo in Bryan Head, and we stop at the gas station and get some drinks and stuff and some food. And she gets back in the vehicle and just lets out this big sigh. And I asked her, I said, "Are you disappointed that you dropped from 3rd to 7th?" And we had a pretty decent rollover. And by the way, she handles rollovers really well. If you get a chance to see her, she gets out all grins and smiles. But anyways, I asked her about that, and she says, "No, Dad, I want the shootout." And that just meant she wants to be an unlimited driver. She wants to do the top stuff. She had made the point a few times during the year that when we're four-wheeling here at home, she'll shoot some of the big stuff, that we use for the unlimited stuff. Maybe not the exact same line, but she's climbing those lines with Pinky after we got it really settled out. Pinky works really, really well after Tori and I put together the suspension system. And we're about to, now that Pinky's retired, we're going to push the front out, roll the ram up, because right now the ram is sitting right under the track bar, and we tucked it up there as far as we could. But we're going to do that, and Pinky is going to be represented at recreational events. So it's going to go back to that old off-again look. We'll probably keep the PSC hood, but it's going to go back to that old look. The unique thing that happened this year is George Zoros came to Jewell and asked her to drive for him. And what that meant was she was going to have a prepped car, the motorhome, the trailer, and him showing up to every event with Trevor Rich from Colorado as her spotter.
Who knows the car inside and out.
Yes, who does know the car very well. And that gives me the opportunity to put up some live videos and do some different things that we've never been able to do so that people can watch at home. We had a lot of viewers. I think when she endoed, I think we had 60 or 70 people watching from home, live, which was super cool. Yeah. And of course, on site, you have thousands of people, which was cool too. But not watching just her. Obviously, they're watching people like Jesse Haynes and Dave Wong and Randall Davis and people like that, which amazing drivers. One of the things that George has pushed Jewell on is to watch those drivers. Some of them have in-cab video. Cody Wagner and Randall used to put on these Trash Talk Tuesday videos. And
Yep.
so she's been watching. And I want to say her watching Jesse Haynes and watching Cody and Randall work together is why she drove the car this weekend the way she did. And seat time, obviously.
Right.
Before this event, she had a couple weekends to drive the car. It wasn't like full days because in the middle of the summer here, it gets over 100 degrees sometimes. And, so you
Like this
practice
week.
in the morning. Yeah, like this week. You practice in the morning and you practice in the evening. So I am very proud of what she did this weekend. We ran through the first day. She was at the finish gate and timed out twice on Saturday. Had the endo on A2, so she was dropping down a rock and went kind of sideways, but front end over. She tried to save it. She tried to drive it back onto the wheels, and she almost had it. And then she ran A3 and had a couple saves and rollovers, but she had a really smooth run. We were pretty proud to see what kind of a run she did there. And then the car wouldn't run. So we had 2 courses that we didn't get to do, and we're still trying to figure out why the car won't run. We're assuming that maybe something's going on with the computer, like it might have a cracked board,
Okay.
or it might be a bad fuse block. We may have actually broken the fuse block in either the rollover or a drop on A3. But we're going to get it back up and running. I think we're going to carry an extra fuse block assembly and also carry an extra computer. That way, if something happens, we're set there, because we carry, or George, I should say, carries just about everything for that vehicle.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
I want to say I really appreciate everything that you've done for us, for We Rock, for Shelly and I, and for Forlow, and everybody that ever wheels here in Farmington. The things that you've done out here and you've done with Red Rock. You may not be one of the names that everybody knows in competitive rock crawling, but those that participate in those areas that you have been at certainly know who you are. And hopefully you get that recognition, because you have been a valuable asset to our lifestyle. And I want to say thank you for spending the time you have with us here on Conversations with Big Rich. And in maybe in about 5 or 6 years, we'll get Jewell on here and we'll talk to her about how she's won her unlimited championship.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yep.
It's my pleasure to do everything I can for not only We Rock Forlow and Conversations with Big Rich, but also just the four-wheeling community. I can't tell you the kind of work that I put into it. It's not necessarily rewarded monetarily, which is okay, because I'm putting the time into it and I've decided to do that.
Right.
But it is rewarding in a way when you see so many people show up to an event that you work so hard for months and months and months on. And you're always going to get those people that are going to tell you, hey, you should have done it this way, or you could have done this.
Oh, all the
and it would have
experts.
been better. Yeah.
The ones that have never done it themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe they have, and they have some good ideas, and maybe they haven't. And I will absolutely, from those people, consider those ideas.
Absolutely.
And I want to make sure that everybody that comes has a good time, and that it's equal for everybody, from the least common denominator to the big dogs. Because, like, for instance, when we do fall crawl, and I'll stop with this, I drive the LJ to lead the lower groups. And that's what I did growing up with Dad. Mom and Dad would always take even though they had a bigger built vehicle, they would always take something where they could show people that haven't been built up yet how to do what they're going to do and what they like, or give them some enjoyment in what they came out to do.
Right.
And so I try to cover everybody with all of it, and also try to be the guide, where our group doesn't always want to be. If you get Matt and Isaac out, they want to take the drag axle group out or the rear steer group. So.
Yep. I get it.
But thanks for having me on, and I really do appreciate that you guys came back to Farmington, and that you continue to use these rocks, because that's what they're here for.
Well, and we appreciate it, and we love this place, really do. So, Rick, say hello to the rest of the family for us today. Maybe we can get together as a group before we drive out of here and head back to Texas. But
okay.
But again, thank you.
Yeah, let's. If you guys are available tomorrow night, give me a shout.
Okay, do that.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.